Welcome back guys to Kini K TV. In this video, I want to talk about a potential Khabib Nurmagomedov vs Dustin Poirier fight, but mainly focus on why and how Dustin Poirier could defeat Khabib Nurmagomedov. So with that being said, let's jump right into the video. The Diamond Dustin Poirier going into this fight is most certainly the underdog. I don't think that anybody will have to say that, okay, this guy, Dustin Poirier, is the antidote to defeat Khabib. But in the end, Dustin Poirier possesses a couple of great threats that haven't really been presented all that much to Khabib Nurmagomedov. We have to understand what type of a fighter Dustin is. When we take a close look at Dustin Poirier, he's not only a tremendous striker, but he's also a very well-balanced grappler. I would have to believe that he is probably the best and most balanced MMA fighter that Khabib has ever faced. For example, if you take a look at Conor McGregor, he is probably the best striker in the lightweight division. So he was a striker, a phenomenal striker. Then we have Edson Barboza, who was yet again a good striker. Then if you take a look at Al Iaquinta, he was a pretty well balanced guy that he didn't really have the best striking, and against Khabib Nurmagomedov, it's pretty hard to be the better grappler to begin with. So Al Iaquinta was outmatched in that aspect in that fight, but he was a pretty well balanced fighter as well. Then if we take a look at Michael Johnson, he was also a pretty good striker where the ground game wasn't really his priority or his area of expertise. So for Dustin Poirier to go into this fight and present a full, well thought out MMA approach where he will probably also try to mix it up against the fence. So for Dustin Poirier to go into this fight against Khabib, I believe that his best strength is to present a well thought out MMA fight. Obviously he's a better striker, but the problem with most of the strikers were that they were pretty linear in their approach. It was only striking. When it comes to Dustin Poirier, he himself was never shy to shoot him for a takedown or even grapple with the best grapplers that he fought. For example, Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, even though Justin Gaethje doesn't really use his grappling all that much, it is still there. So in that aspect, I would have to believe that presenting a takedown threat onto Khabib, like for example Al Iaquinta did early on in the fight, was something that kept the fight standing. And if Dustin Poirier can present a fight where it is not only striking, and Khabib Nurmagomedov will probably have a hard time getting a read onto Dustin Poirier if he does that, that will open up the things that he likes to do himself. Whether that being leading into with his left hand and then finishing up with a combination, or pinning the opponent against the cage and trying to get a takedown. Now if you take a look at the striking department alone, we know that Dustin Poirier is the better, well-rounded and more complete and more versatile fighter out of the two. When it comes to Dustin Poirier, he likes to have the center of the octagon and the opponent on the outside of the cage. So for him to walk down and have Khabib Nurmagomedov's back against the cage is something that I believe will happen in this matchup. When it comes to Khabib, he has always been the type of fighter to not bulldoze right after you. He's pretty smart and very methodical. Against Al Iaquinta in the opening of the fight, he was the fighter with his back against the cage. He was a fighter on the outside of the octagon and trying to look for a way in. Against Conor McGregor, it was the same thing. He was on the outside looking for a way in. Against Michael Johnson, he was trying to look for a way in. So he's not a fighter that will immediately come after you. And the opening of the fight is exactly the moments where you have to establish yourself. For Dustin Poirier to immediately go after Khabib Nurmagomedov and go all out on Khabib is probably not the smartest thing to do. Luckily for us, or I would have to say luckily for Dustin Poirier, by nature he's not really that type of fighter. The only times that Dustin Poirier completely goes all out is when he has his opponents hurt and knows he can finish them. So in the opening of the fight, with Dustin Poirier being very heavy in terms of boxing. He's pretty heavy on his boxing and has pretty sturdy fundamentals, and at the same time he's a pretty heavy guy on the legs. So what I mean by that is he doesn't really move a lot to a point where he's going to start giving up distance. For example, with Edson Barboza, he was consistently moving around and he never really had strong fundamentals, a strong basis to not be pressured by Khabib. If Dustin Poirier can stand his ground and make Khabib understand that it will be pretty hard for him to back him up, from there maybe some frustration or some desperation could set in for Khabib, and then the mistakes can happen. And once those mistakes can happen, I would have to believe that Dustin Poirier will be sharp enough and will be able enough to counter and successfully get off his own game. When it comes to Poirier, he's very heavy on his hands, very heavy on his legs. A lot of power when he throws his leg kicks and a lot of power when he throws his left hand down the pipe. Well, for him to get to that point, I would have to believe that the main contribution to that aspect would be his stance. He is a southpaw fighter. Now, why that is of importance to this fight is because when you take a look at a southpaw fighter going against a regular orthodox fighter, as soon as the southpaw fighter starts circling to the right side and takes away the lead hand and takes the back of the orthodox fighter, that alone presents opportunities and openings that a regular orthodox fighter is not really used to. So when it comes to a jab contest, I would have to believe that Dustin Poirier will get the better of him. I think that Dustin Poirier has improved tremendously on his jab, and I believe that the jab will be enough for Khabib Nurmagomedov to get hit. I think that if he can back up Khabib and land a couple jabs, I think that that will be a key factor in getting desperation set onto Khabib, and for him to make mistakes, and from there he can counter and put Khabib in a position that he hasn't really been in. For example, against Michael Johnson, he got caught with a left hand. Against Conor McGregor, Conor was able to land a few right and left hands also. But when it came to Conor, he was a bit more tired, he was a bit more flat-footed, and seemingly he said he had a broken foot, so I don't really know if he was at his fastest or the most reactive. But then again, the fights that he got hit in were against fighters who were mainly southpaw.
I have these lucid dreams where I can't move a thing, thinking of you in my bed.
If we take a look at this fight from a grappling point of view, then we have to realize that the lead leg is there for Khabib Nurmagomedov to pick that up and go for a single leg and drive Dustin Poirier against the cage. Now obviously that should be the main go-to attack for Khabib Nurmagomedov, being a fighter that is mainly chain wrestling and grinding you down to the cage from the fence most of the time. I think that that is a very valid and efficient strategy to get the fight to his realm, wrestling. Now, to what point can Dustin Poirier use his jab and movement to keep Khabib Nurmagomedov against the cage? How long should he be able to do that? How long could he do that? Now, I don't really know the answer to that question because it is a pretty unknown thing. Yes, we have seen Khabib's back against the cage against Al Iaquinta. Yes, he almost got caught against Al Iaquinta against the cage. We have seen Conor McGregor back up Khabib immediately in the opening of the fight, and that is a tendency that Khabib has. He just backs up immediately when the fight starts. How long can he exploit that? How long can he keep Khabib at that range? I think that from the opening round, I would have to believe that we are severely underrating Dustin Poirier and his abilities to be a smart and a great counterpuncher. I think that by this stage, Khabib Nurmagomedov himself is a bit more comfortable with striking. I don't think that he will throw everything away and become a striker in that matchup like he did against Al Iaquinta in the later rounds. But I do believe that in the opening of the fight, I don't think that Khabib Nurmagomedov will feel as nervous or desperate to get the fight to the ground, and that could work against him. But Khabib has always been a smart fighter, so I don't really think that he will be going all out in terms of striking in the opening of the fight. So that will mean that in that round, in the first opening round, there has to be a major shoot-in for a takedown, and the only takedown that presents itself right there, assuming that Khabib's back against the cage, would be a single leg. Now, could he immediately get a single leg? I would have to doubt that. I would have to believe the first takedowns are always the hardest for Khabib to get. So I would have to believe that Dustin Poirier could defend the first maybe couple takedowns. It's only a matter of time for Khabib Nurmagomedov to successfully push Dustin Poirier up against the cage and do what he does best from there. So in those opening moments, if Dustin Poirier can land his jab and confuse and concuss Khabib, and then follow up with a left hand or go to the body as he has shown against Eddie Alvarez, for example, or stop picking down the legs, that would be a very crucial key because we haven't really seen many people go for the legs against Khabib. Now that may be a tricky thing to do because obviously if he picks your leg, that's it, you're done, you're gonna get taken out. But maybe he has to play with a little bit of fire, and that's really the best thing that Dustin Poirier does. He's not afraid of a scrap, and if the fight happens to become a dogfight, I would have to believe that it most certainly will have to favor Dustin Poirier in terms of being a fighter that can just find a way in a dogfight to get off his own game. Now obviously it's not going to be a dogfight if he gets taken out in the second round and keeps on getting pinned throughout the entire fight and keeps getting smashed, but that is only a matter of time. We won't really know how the fight will play out until it does. So in the end, I believe that Dustin Poirier, with having good hand speed, good power in his hands, being a southpaw fighter, being a fighter who is comfortable being the aggressor in the fight, who can string good powerful combinations, who can slip punches, who can at the end of his combinations end it off with a leg kick, who is not afraid to shoot in for a takedown, who is not afraid to create a takedown presence. I believe that Dustin Poirier would be a pretty surprising opponent for Khabib Nurmagomedov. I think that Dustin Poirier is being majorly underlooked, and I think that if he can present a full, well-rounded MMA game, I believe that he can definitely get the job done on Khabib. But ultimately, only time will tell. For now, this was how and why Dustin Poirier could defeat Khabib, the Eagle Nurmagomedov. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to drop a like and a comment of what you thought of the video. As always, I have been Keenan from Keenan KTV, signing off. Later.